If you keep making the same mistakes, you'll keep fighting the same problems. And obviously, we don't make mistakes on purpose. We just don't realize we're making them. So today, I'll go over 5 mistakes that I've made more than once during my aquarium journey. So hopefully, you don't end up doing the same. I want to tell you guys about something that happened to me recently, because it ended up being a really good lesson, and it's a mistake I've made more than once. So maybe by sharing it with you, I can save you from doing the same thing. A while back, I started having problems with the little filters I use on my aquariums outside. They are very small filters. They are really just there to provide water movement and catch any floating debris. All of the actual biological filtration happens in the thick layer of aquasoil. So what happened was, I removed the little intake sponges from the filters because I wanted to see if I could go longer between cleanings. That part actually worked, but after a while, the filters started getting clogged again, so I cleaned them up. And after cleaning them, they wouldn't start back up. My first thought was that the motors had gone bad. I even ordered a few replacements because I was convinced that's what the problem was. Before I installed the new ones though, I happened to read the troubleshooting section of the instructions. It mentioned that you could pull the propeller out and clean it. I truly had no idea that propeller even came out, so I figured I'll give it a try. As soon as I pulled it out, I found algae wrapped around the magnetic impeller. It was keeping the motor from spinning. I cleaned it off, put everything back together, and the filter started working immediately. Then I checked the rest of the filters. Every single one had the exact same problem. They just needed a little bit of cleaning. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Before you replace a piece of equipment, spend a little bit of time figuring out what's actually wrong with it, because it could be really easy to fix, and that little bit of research can save you a lot of unnecessary frustration. This one is hard to admit, because it's a mistake I've made at least twice, and I really thought I had learned my lesson the first time. One of my earlier aquariums had a pretty large hardscape structure. I was using different kinds of rocks because I wanted each layer to have a different look. I thought it was going to make the hardscape more interesting, but one of those rocks was a mistake. It started releasing this really fine dust into the aquarium. It also kept affecting my water parameters. I couldn't figure out how to stop it. Keeping the water clear became incredibly difficult. Eventually, the moss covered most of those rocks, and that helped trap a lot of the particles, so at least the water started looking clear again. But the parameter issues never went away, and it was one of the reasons I took that aquarium apart. Instead of throwing the rocks away, since they weren't cheap, I kept them. I figured maybe one day I could use them somewhere they wouldn't be visible and in smaller quantities. A few years later, I built another aquarium, and I hid those same rocks behind the hardscape as support. I thought using less of them would solve the problem, but the same thing happened, and once again, it became one of the reasons I had to take the hardscape apart. That's why I believe it's extremely important to research anything you are planning to put inside your aquarium. Not just rocks, sand too. Some types of sand can contain a lot of silicates, and silicates fuel diatoms. You know, brown algae. If the sand is the source, you can spend months trying to solve the problem, and the diatoms would just keep coming back. So before you add anything to your aquarium, spend a few minutes researching it first so you don't make the same mistake I did. If you are enjoying the video, remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and get to more people who love this hobby. This next one is about maintenance, specifically trimming moss, because trimming moss is a little different from trimming every other aquarium plant. Other plants float to the surface when you trim. Moss doesn't. It's heavy enough that it slowly sinks to the bottom. If those little pieces settle underneath your plants, behind your hardscape, or anywhere they don't get enough light, they'll slowly start to melt, and that can become the beginning of an algae problem. Moss already has a tendency to collect algae, so having little pieces of it melting all over the aquarium only makes things worse. But that's not the only issue. Moss is also really good at trapping debris, fish waste, uneaten food, any organic waste floating to the aquarium. Instead of making its way to your filter, it gets trapped in your moss. Then it starts breaking down, and now you've created another place where algae can start taking over. The other problem is that not every piece of moss melts. Some of those little pieces will land somewhere with just enough light to survive. Then you have moss growing in places where you never wanted it. It can start mixing into your carpet plants, it can grow between stems, and getting it back out becomes a real headache. So here's what I recommend. If you're planning to trim your moss, try to do it on the same day you are doing a water change. Before you start trimming, turn your filter off, that way the moss doesn't get blown all over the aquarium. Most of it will fall to the bottom where you can see it. Once you're done trimming, use your water change hose to siphon up all of those little pieces before you refill the tank. You are doing two maintenance jobs at the same time, and you're making sure those moss clippings don't get the chance to create a bigger problem later. Personally, when I don't want to do a water change, I use my vacuum because I can pick up the moss cuttings without removing any water. And it's great for picking up algae as well. If you want to see if it's a good fit for you, this month is a great time to do it, because every order that includes a vacuum comes with free shipping. If you want to check it out, there'll be a link in the description. Something that happened to me when I first got into this hobby, and I really don't want you guys to go through the same thing, was with one of my very first schooling fish. I found these beautiful blue-eye rainbow fish that I loved, so I bought a group of them and added them to my aquarium. But after a few days, I noticed that I was seeing fewer and fewer of them. I thought there was something wrong with my water parameters, and I kept trying different things because I thought I was losing them for some reason I couldn't figure out. Then one day, while I was doing maintenance, I saw one of them jump out of the aquarium. I was able to save that one, but then I realized that's what was happening the whole time. They had been jumping out. I looked around the aquarium, and unfortunately, I found some of the others behind my equipment. It was a tough lesson, but it taught me something that's really important when choosing fish. Some fish are much more likely to jump than others. And if you like keeping your water level very high, you need to keep that in mind before choosing your livestock. A lot of aquascapers keep the water level almost all the way to the top of the aquarium, and there's a good reason for that. Most of us use canister filters with glass lily pipes. If the water level gets too low, those lily pipes create more surface movement, that increases gas exchange, and if you are injecting CO2, you could lose a lot of it. The trade-off is that those aquariums don't have any top dwellers. One easy way to identify those fish is by looking at the shape of their mouth. If the mouth points upward, they usually feed from the surface. Fish like guppies and rainbow fish are good examples. If their mouth points straight forward, like most tetras, they will spend most of their time swimming through the middle of the aquarium. And if the mouth points downward, it's a fish that feeds from the bottom. So if you want to keep your water level high, think about the type of fish you are planning to keep before you buy them. It'll save you from learning this lesson the hard way like I did. This last mistake is one that I've also made more than once, and every time I did, I ended up bringing the same problem back into my new aquarium. Sometimes, things happen in this hobby that make starting over the better option. Most aquariums can be saved, but depending on the problem, the amount of work and time it takes just isn't worth it. So it's simply easier to start over. Maybe you've been fighting a pest that's almost impossible to control. Maybe you've mixed plants that are now impossible to separate, or an algae problem has gotten so out of hand that your plants are barely hanging on. There are plenty of situations where starting over makes sense. You might not even have a problem. It could be that you just want a new setup, different hardscape, different plants, a fresh start. The mistake I've made is trying to bring too much from the old aquarium into the new one. Usually, it's the hardscape or the plants. I always think I can clean them well enough. One time, I was dealing with bladder snails, and I wanted to reuse the substrate because I had a lot of it. So I left it outside in the sun for weeks. Every few days, I would turn it over so every part of it dried completely. I was convinced there was no way anything could survive. Somehow, I still ended up with bladder snails in the new aquarium. The substrate was the only thing I had reused, so it had to be where they came from. The same thing can happen with algae, especially black-beard algae. You might only have a tiny bit left on a rock or a plant, but that's all it takes. Once it's in the aquarium, you are right back where you started. So if you've decided it's time for a fresh start, don't bring the old problems with you. If you're starting from scratch, really start from scratch. And if something similar has happened to you, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear how you fixed it.